Well, let's be clear. Most of my life, I've been at the wrong place at the right time or the right place at the wrong time. But eventually you keep showing up. Somehow you happen to be at the right place at the right time. You know, I tell people all the time in the beginning, when you're for nickels, you say yes to everything. I got to pay the bills. Yes? What? I can do that. I figure it out. And then eventually when you find what you can win at or what you can be really good at, you then have to say no to the other stuff that takes you away from being the best at the one thing you can say yes at.
You have some scars, you battle through them, and you came out alive.
Barely, yeah.
But that's what it's about.
Yeah. I mean, I'm lucky as shit. I tell people, white guy born in the U.S. with a little bit of discipline, it's hard to fuck it up. Because with my intelligence, if you would have put me anywhere else in the world, we probably would not be having this conversation.
Well, that's what Warren Buffett calls the birth lottery.
The ovarian lottery, exactly.
Birth lottery.
Yeah.
Do you think not only being American, but perhaps is it the American mindset as well?
Well, yeah, it's the American mindset. It's my parents' mindset. It's the fact that I, was kind of hedonistic and I wanted to do shit that I liked to do. And, then, at some point you realize I just want to enjoy my life and I want to do this. Originally I thought, I like design. I want to be an architect. I got an internship in an architecture firm, and they had all this math. This was 1975. There were no computers. So I'm like, all the plumbing and electrical, I got to do all this math. I quit, right? I don't know if you know anything about architecture, but that firm is now called Arquitectonica.
Oh, wow.
It's one of the biggest in the world. I was the first intern in 1975 of 3 people that started the firm. I could have been somebody.
Yeah, they've built half of Miami.
That's correct, and other notable buildings around the world. So they're amazing. But that wasn't the passion. The passion was like draw and design and stuff, and I liked the creative part of it. And at the time, it wasn't that simple. There's a lot of work that goes into that, at least I find at that point.
I actually studied architecture 1 year, and my teacher came on the first day and said, architecture school is the hardest school there is. And if you put it hard work to pay ratio, it's the worst.
It's probably true.
Yeah.
I mean, I did this when I was 15. It was just kind of a passing fancy to be on an internship. That's not what I studied in college from that very thing, right? I don't know if we're
let's do it.
Okay. So what I ended up wanting to do is production, television and film production. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. You travel around, you're with a bunch of cool people. You don't have like a desk job where you're sitting behind, they didn't have computers there, but a desk, and you're having fun and you're seeing the world. And that was kind of my passion to do travel films and stuff. Or just do travel stuff, right? And there was less of a focus on, oh my God, I gotta make money. I was never really hurting for money, so I didn't have that sense of desperation.
But before the traveling, you didn't traveling documentaries or docuseries or television media. You weren't in media.
No.
Where does your story start?
It kind of started when I was 16. I was me and 5 teenage friends were sent to the jungles of Honduras to look for a lost city, and that has nothing to do with business. But we thought, wow, how cool. Like an adventure. It was like Indiana Jones, and we're going to find a lost city. We're going to be on Johnny Carson, right? That was the late night guy. And it wasn't anything like we anticipated it would be. It was miserable, and we thought we were going to die, and it was a bunch of drama, and then you came back and you started to appreciate things more. After that, they sent a film crew to film some of what we discovered, some of the ruins, not the lost city. And that's where I fell in love with, oh my God, these guys are young and they're having fun and they're partying and this is what I want to do, right? So that started that focus. Then I go to college, University of Arizona in Tucson. And at the time, I was hopelessly addicted to a video game called Pac-Man. And there I was in a laundromat in my sophomore year with a pocket full of quarters and 2 hours with nothing to do but watch the clothes, and I didn't want to crack the books. So I'm like, this place needs a Pac-Man, right? I break out the phone book. Again, this is the late 70s. I break out the phone book and I call every laundromat in Tucson and I said, you guys have video games? Nobody did. I said, do you want some? And a couple, yeah, sure. And I'll split the revenue with you. And I didn't have any money, so I took my college tuition. I went to an auction and I bought a crappy machine. I can't remember what it was called, but it was Frisky Tom. And we put it in a laundromat. A couple of months later, it made its money back. And that was essentially the first sort of opportunistic entrepreneur thing that I did. Is like, I just wanted it for me. But ultimately, you do this, and then you're like, wow, it's doing well. I can't even play the game because every time I'd go in, I'd be taking money from myself. It's like a dealer doing his own stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that kind of got me started with, okay, opportunities, entrepreneurship, do things that I enjoy doing.
Going like one step back, because I think it's important for people to know you a little bit better. If I called someone that knows you really well, what would they say is your superpower? And what is the cost associated to that?
Yeah. Well, let's say the superpower is probably discipline, right? I am very structured, organized, and disciplined. And I think that comes from athletics. As a kid, I was a swimmer, so we were always swimming and, from 4 to 6 hours a day in a pool. And then going to, the jungles in Honduras, the discipline to do the things to survive, really. So I think with any business and starting a business, people start with all the, fanfare of, ooh, I'm going to make it rich in a year. And then, a year drags into 2 and 3 and you're like, oh, this sucks. Mm-hmm. The discipline to continue to, if you will, wash, rinse, repeat, do it again, wash, rinse, repeat, do it again, is really hard for entrepreneurs to get. You know what I mean? If you have that kind of discipline to do it, even when times tell you, it ain't working, or you have to pivot, you have to continue on. And I know they say that towards the end of all of this, most people quit before that gets to that turning the corner.
Sure.
I don't know if that's true or not, but a lot of people do have a different view of what it takes to succeed.
I think it's so, there's a juxtaposition there, right? There's the strive for freedom. You wanted to do whatever you wanted to do, which seems a little bit anti-discipline, right? It's like the most disciplined person, I would say they're perfect to be an employee, to go the corporate route, to just ride that wave, and you could be successful that way. And now you got the entrepreneurial bug by going to Honduras. And then you did a very opportunistic startup. I wouldn't even call it a startup. You saw an opportunity to put these video games in laundromats. What happened then?
So, after that, I go to Los Angeles. I have this dream. By the way, I sell the business. Don't make a lot of money, but I was smart enough to sell the business and have them pay me little bits over 2 years. That way, I wouldn't be an idiot like young kids generally are, and I'd spend it all right away. I did anyway, but I ended up selling the business, going to Los Angeles. When I get to Los Angeles, I read the paper, and I'm like, all right, what am I going to do now? And there were ads for game show contestants. And I'm like, woohoo, I'm going to be on a game show. So I went to this new show called Press Your Luck. I was on the second show that aired. I won $8,650 or something like that. I'm like, damn, and at that time, that was a lot of money. So I've got money coming in from the business. I've got money from a game show. And what do? Party and snort it and stick it all up my nose. So at the end of the day, at some point you realize, okay, this is not working out. I need to go and do something. Let me get out of this environment. Now, I always wanted to, and when I went to LA, I wanted to get in the film and production business. That was my passion. I ended up getting on to a film crew traveling around doing travel films as a PA, which essentially means go get the coffee and pick up the cables and crappy jobs. But after several years moving my way up, sound guy, and eventually I'm producing travel films. So I spend the better part of a decade traveling around with production and travel films which is where we were doing filming for Eastern Airlines in Chile. And then we realized that the government went from a dictatorship with Pinochet into a democracy. Opportunity, right? I don't want to travel anymore. I need to be in a single bed for more than a couple of weeks. And so I ended up pitching a show to the new network in Chile called Machos, which was a ripoff from a game show I did in LA called Studs. The guy who put me, there was associate producer on Press Your Luck, ended up putting together another show on Fox called Studs. And he calls me up because we became friends. And he says, Henry, I've got this show. And I go, yeah, oh yeah, I'm interested. He says, yeah, it's called Studs. I'm like, no way. There's no way I'm doing a show called Studs. Fuck it. He goes, we set you up with 3 dates and we pay for the dates. And I'm like, when do I start? Right? So I go on that show and I win as well. And I'm thinking, wow, about 8 or 9 months later, Chile has an opportunity to get programming. Chile had a very young demographic at the time. And I thought, this would be great because the old Pinochet revolution had very conservative stuff for the Católicas and stuff like that. And so I ended up flying down there, pitching the show, and a couple of months later, we were on the air.
What's the through line of scrappy entrepreneur, media, Latin America? What do you think is the through line?
I think ignorance. I say that honestly, like, if you don't know what you don't know, you believe you can do the things that later when you find out, man, that was really hard. If I'd have known then what I know now, I may not have done that, right? To sit there and say, listen, I'm going to go on a plane and fly to Latin America and, because I knew a guy with the studio guys we did with Eastern. I knew him, so he introduced me to the television. So, and I spoke Spanish. So I went there and I pitched and I put together the presentation and everything. So I just didn't know that it wasn't possible. The ignorance, like, who do you think you are? I'm not a game show producer. But I went down there and I pitched myself as this young, hot American producer, which was bullshit. So I guess it was kind of, bullshitting your way through, like, fake it till you make it thing,
I'm going to say, I love that you said ignorance, because I find that there's so many entrepreneurs today that want to have all the information, the ChatGPT world, and you have to make the decision when you have all these things, but you just went and did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
What advice do you have to people that are in that mode?
Yeah. Well, I think if somebody's in a mode, the first thing you got to understand is this a problem? Is this a problem that you feel that other people might have? And can you fix it, right? Game shows, my problem. I mean, I'm sorry. The Pac-Mans, the games in laundromats, it was my problem. I wanted to play and I was bored. But I realized other people had quarters and were sitting there wanting to play as well, right? And the game shows in Chile, it was because, there's new content opportunities. There's young people, there's nothing for them. Oh, here's a good idea in the States. Let me go rip it off and take it to Latin America. So the reality is, I think that if you're solving a problem, one, if you believe that if it doesn't work, you can pivot, right? Because I've done plenty of things in my life where it didn't work and I pivoted. So I think the underlying thing is, are you solving a problem and do you have the capacity and the tenacity to do it? And in my case, I didn't know how to raise money. And so when people say, well, how'd you do it? I said, had I known how to raise money in my last business, I would have spent it all and I would have fucked it up and bankrupt the business. Because people who don't know have to learn by making those mistakes. Like bootstrapping, oh, you can't do that, man. That costs a lot of money. And then you start to figure out what's working, what's not working, and how to do it, and how to be disciplined about it.
I love it. I love it because there's too many people too focused with raising money. I have an investment fund, and I say I make the best investments in the world. And they say, how can you make the best investments in the world? I say, because I have no money. I have to be so careful when you place every single dollar. Whereas the Blackstones, the big boys, they can, they can bet on all the boats. They can bet on all the horses. One of them is going to win.
Correct. I mean, let's be clear. Not every business can start with bootstrapping. I mean, there are a lot of capital intensive businesses.
Correct,
but
correct.
in the tech and software world, generally speaking, not if you're building data centers and those kind of things, but in my old world, you didn't need it. But now I see a lot of upstarts and like, yeah, we've got no revenue, but we're raising $10 million. I'm like, what? You know, I don't get that. I don't get how you believe that that's going to, I mean, if you look at the statistics, the number of startups that fail is scary. You know, and if you're a startup and you really look at that, you probably wouldn't start it up because the odds are definitely against you. Mm-hmm. That's the ignorance part of it. You know, you go into it and you think, yeah, but I'm different, man. I'm better. Or I'm more tenacious, or I'm going to work harder. You can work hard as you want if you have a DVD replicating factory and nobody wants DVDs. You know, it's relative.
Exactly. What was the moment in your life? You're here in Chile. You're doing this kind of crazy pitch. What was the moment of your life that was maybe the turning point of, okay, now things are getting really serious. Now things are getting more successful. The stakes were bigger.
It was really later in life, because when you're younger and you try things and the whole ignorance, if they say no, or if you lose the gig, you don't have far to fall. I didn't have a house and kids and a family. So what? Well, I can sleep on somebody's couch, right? I think that became more obvious later after I had a wife and a daughter and a house. And I realized, if this doesn't work, my next question will be, would you like fries with that burger? I mean, there was no plan B, right? So there was a point with my last business, it was called Ice Portal, that we were, you know, eking it out. I was paying myself far less than I was making before. And I thought to myself, if this doesn't work, I don't know what I'll do. I would have to work for somebody else and some, you know, flipping burgers type job, if you will.
What was Ice Portal? What problem did you see?
Yeah. So when I came back from the production, when I was in Chile, somebody showed me this 360-degree virtual tour. This is in the mid-90s. And I'm like, that is the coolest thing ever. I don't have to travel with 5 guys and 17 pieces of luggage. I'm going to set up a company and do virtual tours of destinations. So I set up a company called World Travel Vision, doing virtual tours, doing destinations and hotels. And then eventually somebody says, how do we put these virtual tours on this new World Wide Web thingy? I'm like, I don't know, send them a CD-ROM. What do I know about the internet, right? And they said, yeah, they don't know what to do with it. There are no standards. I'm like, all right, let me see what I can do to help. And I realized the more I produce content, production is a zero-sum game. Any kid with a computer and a camera is now a competitor, right? The value is in the distribution. So I start figuring out how to distribute virtual tours to what's called the OTAs, the online travel agencies, like Expedia and Orbitz and Travelocity. And so I tell my partner, I said, listen, we're going to have to not pay each other for about a year to build the platform in order to manage and distribute the content to these travel sites. He was a younger guy. He says, I can't live that long. I'm like, good, I'll buy you out. Best thing that ever happened to me, right? So we converted World Travel Vision into Ice Portal, Internet Content Exchange, which was originally set up to deliver travel content to the online travel sites. First virtual tours, and then the realization that the big problem and the need to have is photos, right? Early on, you'd dial up and you'd see a travel site and there'd be a bunch of thing photo not available. Like, well, I'm not going to book that place. I don't even know what it looks like, right? It was easier in the past to book a Hilton or a Holiday Inn or something that you knew what the brand standards were, but not Henry's Hotel. Never heard of it. It's probably a dump. You know, they're charging me too much. I want to see a picture, right? So we ended up focusing on delivering visuals for hotels to the travel sites. So Ice Portal, Internet Content Exchange. Eventually, if you go on any travel site on the planet and you see pictures of a hotel, that would have come through our servers, because every travel site has a different size, tagging, they have coding, they have IDs. Everything is very disparate. So I pull it down from Hilton, for example, and I size tag, categorize it, and send it to every site on the planet in multiple languages. That's what Ice Portal did.
Who was your first customer?
Well, the first customer were, we started with the virtual tours. So what I originally did is I called every hotel in Cancun, because Cancun had a lot of tour operators and they were big and they were close. So I said, listen, I've got a client that's, hiring me. This was bullshit. I said, I got a client that's hiring me and I'm going to be in Cancun. So listen, if you don't mind, I will stop by. I'll shoot your hotel. I will charge you nothing. And if you like it, you pay me. If not, you owe me nothing, no obligation. Just put me up in a room. And 29 hotels said yes. So I'm like, woo! I go on a plane. I go to Cancun. I shoot 29 hotels. 27 ended up paying me. So the first one to say yes was the Moon Palace, the Palace Resorts in Cancun. And that essentially started I've got to get my foot in the door. I've got to get content, right? You can't build it without content, and you can't distribute it without the content. You can't have the distribution. It's a chicken and egg. But when we started with virtual tours, they were relatively novel. So we got into the door to the online travel sites with virtual tours. And then we realized the bigger problem was photos. Not the bigger problem. The main driver is photos. And eventually the travel sites didn't want virtual tours because it took longer for them to get them to the book now button. They're like, okay, here's the price, here's some pretty pictures, book now, right? That was the goal.
It's incredible to think that today many people take it for granted, but you're 100% right. A Airbnb would never exist without the precursor of having the pictures that we wouldn't trust as a society anything we saw online,
right?
Just at face value. We would like to see the pictures. Have you seen? And then there's so many stories of, we got jibbed. The bed said king, but they're really European king.
Yeah.
You're like, these are small people.
Yeah. And therein lies some of the challenge really. Before, you would go to a travel agent, a brick and mortar on the corner, and you'd say, listen, I'm going to New York and I need a hotel. And they say, hey, there's an Intercontinental or a Hilton. And you go, okay, you kind of know what that is. And here's the price. You never saw a picture. They were looking at a green screen. Internet comes along. All of those systems, they call them the GDSs, the global distribution systems, they never had pictures. There wasn't literal bandwidth and capacity for pictures in those systems. So the internet comes along, and now we need a separate place to put pictures and then marry it together on the website. So the reality was, now you can easily show, here's what you're going to get. Here's what the bathroom looks like. Here's what your view looks like, right? Oh, this is a standard bed. Oh, and in Europe they call it this bed, or this is, that superior room, and here we call it a standard room. There are all kinds of idiosyncrasies with what you see. I had no idea. I never knew anything about the travel industry. I never knew anything that this was a problem until clients came to me and said, help me out. How do I get this virtual tour stuff on these travel websites? Okay, I don't know, right? And, you help them figure it out and you realize, this is a problem. I think I can solve this. And that's kind of where it happened. That was a really lucky right place at the right time.
When people say right place, right time, I feel that it's a way of saying, I don't know if I could do it again.
Well, let's be clear. Most of my life, I've been at the wrong place at the right time, or the right place at the wrong time. But eventually you keep showing up. Mm-hmm. Somehow you happen to be at the right place at the right time.
And you didn't even know travel. You didn't even know this stuff.
I had no idea. Travel was not my business. I mean, travel films, but not travel.
Yeah.
No. And not certainly not technology.
Correct. Was there a moment when you were building the platform, when you were building all this, that you had to say no? That someone said, when you're an entrepreneur, yes is everything on the first year. Can you do these pictures? Oh, yeah, I can figure it out. Then you said yes to putting them on those sites and distributing them, and et cetera, et cetera. Was there a no that was very pivotal to being successful, or was there a no that you said, man, we should have done that?
Yeah. I tell people all the time, in the beginning, when you're a whore for nickels, you say yes to everything.
Oh, yeah.
I got to pay the bills. Yes? What? I can do that. I figure it out. And then eventually when you find what you can win at or what you can be really good at, You then have to say no to the other stuff that takes you away from being the best at the one thing you can say yes at. So in my case, we started producing virtual tours, and we started producing and distributing virtual tours. Because originally it was on a CD-ROM. Here's your CD-ROM, go to the trade show, show off your place. And then eventually it was distributed, right? And then eventually I'd say, look, I'll do it really cheap and distribute it, and you pay me for the distribution, because it was a loss leader. And then eventually I'm like, you know what? Virtual tours are not the business I want to be in. I want to be in the photo distribution business. Less money, a lot more opportunity. So I would eventually shit can all of our photographers that were virtual tour photographers, and I would focus no longer on virtual tours and say no to everything except managing and delivering photos. That's all we did.
It's incredible, right? Because it's sort of like you lost your, I have a saying, it's kill your baby. When people start their companies, they're like, but my baby is virtual tours.
That was an ugly baby. No, I'm kidding. I don't have that, oh my God, I'm in love with this. Well, it may be the one thing I'm doing now, but I'm in love with this. I can't let it go. No, I was like, you know what? Better opportunity here. You come to the realization when people say these businesses, oh my God, there's a lot of competition. Like I want to start this, and like everybody's doing something like that. How do you differentiate, right? The hardest thing with businesses is try to create a moat or something that is hard. It's really, really, really hard for somebody to come in and replicate what I did. Not the technology. That was easy. But you can go to Wyndham, one of my clients, largest hotel group in the world. You say, listen, I've got this technology, size, tag, categorize, and it'll take care of all your images. And they go, great. Where does it go? Well, I'm talking to Expedia right now. Okay, what about Booking and Despegar? I mean, literally thousands around the world. Oh, that'll take me years. Good, call me then. You can't get a contract with a hotel or a hotel group, because that was another thing. Originally, the virtual tours were individual hotels. Pain in the ass to collect the money. And then we go to groups, Hilton, Wyndham, Hyatt, Best Western. These are big companies. You give them one invoice for all their thousands and thousands of hotels, and they send you the money within a couple of days. It's amazing. You don't have to chase anybody down. But anybody that wants to come in and compete and says, I can build that technology. Yeah, but you know how many, it took me almost 2 decades to build the distribution in order to get to that point.
I want to highlight that what you said before, and it goes with distribution, that content isn't king. It's distribution. And it applies today to social media. You can have the best video. And I think when people ask me about media and social media and YouTube, and like you can spend thousands of dollars doing one take, but if you cannot show it to anybody, it's better to build up your distribution than to put your money into the content.
Yeah. But it's hard, I mean, now everybody wants to be an influencer, like, okay. Or everybody wants to do a podcast. It's like, how many podcasts are out there? How many influencers are out there? How many are really making money? I mean, enough to sustain themselves. That's really hard, because there's a tremendous opportunity, but you have to be really differentiated in order to get that viral growth, in my opinion.
And like you said, the moat.
Yeah.
The moat around you has to be something so unique that people cannot replace you. So this became a huge business. You were successful. You said you're in the right moment, right time. You bought out your partner early, so best decision ever.
Yeah, I hope he's not watching. He knows that.
If he is, I want him on the podcast and he can tell his story.
Yeah. He's living under a bridge now. No, I'm kidding.
When did you start to feel you have to sell?
Yeah, that's a good question, because, at some point you realize, okay, I'm learning what I didn't know then, the bootstrapping my way up, putting, the procedures and the practices in place, and creating the SOP and streamlining things. Now I got to figure out what I need to do to sell the business, right? And, in my mind, I would generate 6 to 8 times EBITDA, right? And I also need to get out of the day-to-day, and I need to hire people to do the things so that people will say, do you need that guy? And they say, of course not. And then I can easily leave. So I created as much process procedure as I possibly could. And then I thought, okay, let me expand out and go to like Airbnb. You know, I had met with the people at Airbnb, and I got contacted by a couple of, you know, large companies saying, we're interested. And I'm like, yeah, but, you know, I'm really not there. You know, to be honest, I had a number up on my mirror for a decade. I wanted to know how I could live the rest of my life without having to worry about money, right? I mean, I'm not buying yachts and boats, right? Or planes. I just wanted to be comfortable and not have to worry and travel and have fun. And that was my number. So I ended up saying, look, I'm not ready yet because I think I need to raise my, you know, my revenue and my EBITDA conversion. And finally, the company says, you know, well, what's your number? So of course, I tell them my number, and they didn't laugh. And, you know, a month later, they called me up, and this is an international company, and they said, can we meet in Atlanta? And, you know, they fly in the CFO from Singapore, and they fly in the COO, and they throw out all these numbers. Now, I'm making good money. We're making about $1 million a year. I have no debt. I have no boss. And I say to the guys, I said, listen, I appreciate it. I have no boss. I have no board. I have no debt. I'm making good money. Unless I get my number, I have no reason to sell. I'm not in a position where I'm desperate. So this is my number. And they looked at each other, maybe 30 seconds, but it felt like minutes. And they just went, fine, you got a deal. No investment banker. 60 days later, the money was in my bank. A year later, COVID came and decimated the hospitality industry. So I got lucky. I got really lucky. Yeah. They wanted, now, this was a big company, and they knew that they either had to build it or buy it. And building it, as I said, will take years in making the connections to those APIs, right? The interfaces of the other companies. And so they figured, listen, it was like a 20 times EBITDA.
It sounds amazing. It sounds, thank you for taking us there. Because I think I can feel, I was in the room and you got your number. How did it feel the next day?
You know, I was kind of numb, right? Mm-hmm. I'm still, this is 6 years later, right? I'm still having fun, but I'm still like, I still cannot believe how lucky I got. It's almost like, not that I don't deserve it, but wow, right? Because literally the year later, COVID comes. This is a company that was backed, you probably know who Alibaba is in China, but it was backed by Alibaba. It was a $7 billion Chinese company called Shiji. And you know what happened after that with the Chinese, and people like, oh no, Chinese, no. So, you know, right place, right time, right elements. It's still a very profitable company for them. You know, we still have all the contracts that we did. But I think they had planned on doing other things that was more challenging with the U.S. market because of what happened with the anti-China sentiment. But in answer to your question, I look at it and I'm like, man, am I lucky? You know, I don't look at it like, woohoo, I'm going to go crazy like I would have as a 20-something-year-old and partied or something. I invested. I've done some investments with it and traveled a lot.
Did you ever get seller's remorse?
No, never.
Not one day.
Not a day. And I'll tell you why. Because I have a lot of friends who have businesses. And when I hear them talk about their employees and the clients and the challenges and the legal stuff, and I'm like, whew, thank you for, you know, slapping me in the face with that reality. You know, the employees are getting challenging. You know, they want to work less. They want more money. They want more benefits. They want to work from home. I'm like, oh my God, right? I didn't have that. This was pre-COVID, right? So the world has changed a little bit. And I think the dynamics for business owners has gotten more difficult as well.
Yeah, for sure. How did you deal, when I sold my company, I remember people saying, Ahmad, you're the quinoa guy. So they would say, hey, how's the quinoa? And then I sold the company and people would be like, hey, how's the quinoa? And I had to be like, oh, so it's not, well, actually I sold it. And I had like this identity crisis before. I had direct reports. I had people that I managed. And suddenly I was all by myself. And it felt strange. It felt like alternate universe. I was like, did I dream this? Did this happen? And I didn't feel like I'm sure you didn't feel that you got richer. Perhaps you thought you just changed one asset for the other. That's how I felt. I was like, nothing's changed.
Yeah.
I'm still the same. I didn't win the lottery. I didn't feel that way. How did you live that identity crisis bit or change or difficulty?
And it's funny because when you say it didn't change, there was a time in my life back in the 20s when I didn't really have a lot of money, but I wanted to spend what I had on a car that I couldn't afford to impress people that I didn't know, right? And now that I don't give a crap, it's like I want a comfortable, reliable car that takes me from A to B. So I think it's different in the way I perceive it. But the reality was I had always planned on selling the company because I always knew that I wanted to go full circle and produce a series. It was originally a movie, but a series from a book that I bought back when I was in LA. So that idea is, look, I'm going to sell this and I don't have to worry about money because nobody in production, I mean, very few people in production are making money, and it's even worse now with AI filmmaking. And so I thought, at least at some point, I can do what I really wanted to do and not have to worry about bills, right? And my wife and I get to travel, regularly. So I don't think I ran through as big an identity crisis simply because I had always figured that plan out. When people tell me, oh, I want to sell the business and go play golf every day. And I'm like, okay, yeah. And then in week 2, then what? Or I'll go lie on the beach. I'm like, yeah, okay. If you're an entrepreneur and you have that ADD personality, you can't just say, okay, I'm done and do nothing.
Yeah.
Right? That's not possible. But if you have a plan in place or you have set up, this is what's going to happen when I sell. And I had a true 2-year transition anyway to transition income. So I worked less in those 2 years than I worked in the entire life of the company. And the motivation wasn't there. But I also worked on the other things that I wanted to do, which is really coming to fruition now, which is, a different dimension. It's not one that I would look at, oh, I'm going to go do this and make money. Even though AI filmmaking is getting very interesting.
I appreciate that. And I think when you were talking, you were ready for it. In my case, it was a call like out of the blue, hey, we want to buy your company. And I said, it's not for sale. And then I was like, yes, let's get this.
Yeah, I even paid myself a ridiculous salary, knowing that if somebody bought me and wanted to keep me on, they'd have to stay with that salary.
Yeah, so you were very planned.
I kind of knew what I needed to do in advance. So if somebody came along, they had the data room where they had 3 or 4 pages of questions. Within 24 hours, everything was in the data room because we already had all that stuff. It was already organized. It was ready to go. So we were well equipped for, you want to buy it? Okay, fine. Here it is. Here's all the information. We were very transparent. So it was a lot easier because we kind of knew at some point it was going to happen. I didn't think it would happen that soon. That was just fortuitous. Yeah.
So to your friends that are still grinding and going and blowing and having all these problems, and it seems like you got a lot of the exit stuff right because you were prepared, but what did you get wrong that you might have gotten, okay, this part I could have improved and maybe your friends could benefit from this advice?
That's a really hard question because it would be hypocritical for me to say that I did anything wrong. When somebody says, okay, we'll give you what you want, I'm like, damn, I should ask for more. But in hindsight, I knew exactly what I wanted, and I had prepared all of what I thought would be the information that somebody would need. So I don't think that I had any mistakes because I hear all kinds of stories, from people that started it and then they dragged it on and then they lowered the price, or they came in, they found some stuff in their due diligence and that changed. And I'm like, oh my God, am I lucky? Or gave up 5% to an investment banker or whatever it is. I mean, I wish I had horror stories to relay, but I don't. That's why I say I'm incredibly lucky that somebody came along and said, you know what, here's your price, fine.
Let's go to your second chapter. When you sell, when you go into that second life and you said, nothing is as important to me as what I'm doing now. When did that reignite? Or was it there was a year you took off, or did you say, okay, sold, now I'm going to go to what I really want to do?
Well, let me first qualify and say the most important thing, whether you're running the business, after the business, identity of the business, is your health, right? So even when I was running the business, I would literally take the middle of my day, if I didn't have a call or I was traveling, and go do a workout. I'd go swim or I'd do something. So my health was paramount, right? So that was kind of a non-negotiable. And I see people that are working their butts off, and I would ask them, after they sell the company, I'm say, so what advice do you have? And almost inevitably they'd say, don't miss your kids growing up, right? And so I made a point of trying to get home early, trying to be there for the weekends and be there with the family, and not say, my daughter go, I don't know, I never saw him, right? So that was an important thing. But in answer to your question, I think the identity for me was I always had I didn't really plan on running a business like that, a global tech, and nothing I know about, right? I went back to school in my 50s to get an MBA because I did a presentation and there were a bunch of MBA students in the room, and I thought, what a fraud, man, imposter syndrome big time. These kids know more than I do, and here I am, this entrepreneur, bullshit, right? So I go back to school, I get my MBA, and I do really well. I'm like, okay, so certain things, lean management, that hit me because I'm running a business. I could apply it right then and there. So once I did that, then I go, what do I really want to do? Which is the identity next step, is what I wanted to do 40 some odd years ago. And that is get in and do the creative part of creating, a film. Now it's a series.
How did you, if you had this dream for 40 years, right? You were probably daydreaming about it, but how was it that being an entrepreneur, now having an exit, then becoming a CEO, because you weren't a CEO, you were an entrepreneur, and then you had to grow, and then you had to sell, and then you became an investor.
Yeah.
How did all that prepare you to be a better filmmaker?
I would have to say everything you do in life along the way is bits and pieces that, stitch that story together. Because without it, you wouldn't have all of the knowledge base and information to do it right. I mean, I don't know a lot about production, but I don't need to as an executive producer. I just need to assemble the team. It's the same thing. And, in business, essentially, you have to start, you wear multiple hats. It's really good if you know all the parts of your business. But as you grow, and they always say, don't work in the business, work on the business. It's true. If you can get away after like 10 people and just have people do the things that you don't like to do, and then get away from the day-to-day and you have people that you trust, it's the same concept with production. And production is, relationships, and it's also now distribution. It is now a new era. So I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I think the preparedness is just a lot of experience, making mistakes, learning things in business. And even producers I talk to now, they're like, oh man, I wish I would have done that, just done tech and made a little bit of money instead of now. Because, in many things, they produce a series, they make a little bit of money, they do well. Then they got to pound the pavement, try to find the next thing to do. And it's getting harder and harder because the entertainment world has now gotten to social media and YouTubes and micro dramas and, a bunch of streamers. So it's not as it once was. It's a different world.
What do you think is the most misunderstood part of filmmaking?
The most misunderstood. I think the challenge really is, I don't think people realize the amount of effort and time that goes into watching an hour, 2 hours on TV. They watch it and it's like, that's nice. I don't understand how much time somebody from an idea to the writing, to the developing, to the tweaking, to the lighting, to the acting, to the directing, to all of the things and the editing and the music that go into just showing you mindless entertainment for an hour. I think that's a real, now, obviously that's changing with AI filmmaking, because if you can prompt well and you have a good creative sense, you can say, listen, I want this podcast scenario with Ahmad, and I want to sit there, and this is what I want to show, and the background has a flamingo. It's there. None of this stuff would have to happen. That's the scary part. It's democratizing that difficulty that once was sort of this, what happens? Why does it cost gazillions of dollars to produce this beautiful movie? And that's, I think, what they don't always understand.
I saw something about 4 years ago or 5 years ago that Netflix got like $10 billion to produce movies. And then Amazon came and said, we're going to do 11 billion. And then Apple, 15 billion. Like everybody poured in money. And the headline of this news was, if you have a story to tell, now is the moment to do it. It is unlimited money.
Yeah.
And then the consequence, I saw that another crazy statistic that was like Netflix produced or distributed 700 titles in a year. If your social media produced 700 pieces a year, that would be insane. But like you're saying, there's so many working parts, and that's diluting. So if you could change something about this industry, if you could change something about where it's going, or shed some light so that people are more aware, what would it be?
Yeah, I mean, listen, the reason everybody was spending all that money and throwing money at content production was because it's an arms race. It always comes down to the subscriber, Netflix wanted more subscriber. They get more content. They get more people. They have niche audiences. The same thing with Amazon. And now they realized, wow, it's challenging, right? And I think that, well, the truth is when people say, wow, more stuff being made with AI and it's just going to be more crappy content. There's crappy content now, right? I think if it's good creative content, it will always rise to the top, much like you see with social media and people that do viral things. It's like, do you know that when you do it, it's going to be viral? Of course not.
No.
Right? And so the same thing with content. Produce something you have a passion for, right? There may be other people that have that same passion, right? That have the same sort of idea. That's why I think it's going to get more and more niche audiences. Like if I don't want to see this type of thing, medical dramas, then I want to see this type of thing. Okay, don't show me medical dramas, but I also have this stuff. And I think that's where we're getting better. And we're also losing as an audience, we're losing our attention span. Instead of being able to spend an hour or two watching something on TV, we want a TikTok or something really quick. And now they're calling them micro dramas, which are really big in Asia, which you watch 2-3 minutes and then you go, oh, I'm going to go to the bathroom. And then you sit there on the looking at something, and then you come back and then you take a smoke break and then so you'll watch 5 or 6 during the course of a day. And then you get addicted and then you have to pay for the rest. Yeah. Yeah.
What do you feel is harder? To have a startup like you did and scale it like a product and solve a problem, or produce a story that connects with you emotionally and just tells it beautifully?
First of all, both of them incredibly hard. Startups, depending on the problem you're solving, and producing, I think it's everybody's fantasy. So it's, again, a very competitive world. Knowing what I know now, like most people, I probably would have done something differently. If I had any idea, I would probably have bought a business, especially now that there are a lot of baby boomers with small, more manual type businesses like, motorcycle repair, or lawnmower fixer, air conditioning, They have businesses. They're doing well. They have a client base and they want to get out. It's only a couple of bucks. And instead, I would say, listen, I will pay you with your profits $60,000 a year for the next 5 years. You get $300,000, right? Your profit. And you'll be a consultant. And if I fail, you get your business back. You lose nothing. Why wouldn't people that can't sell their business do that? And that insulates you from having to do all the process and the procedure and marketing to know who you are, because those businesses exist. Now, not that I'm telling people they should do this, but I look at it and it's really hard to get something off the ground. I mean, the first 6 or 7 years of my business, I was struggling. I was miserable. I was like ready to throw in the towel.
What's your rule for persisting versus pivoting?
Wow. I don't necessarily have a rule unless it's obvious, right? Because, there's still people producing virtual tours. I was in CES and I saw this company that was doing these 360s on, the drones and stuff. It's really cool stuff. But it's a hardware play. And at some point I realized it is a race to the bottom with other, kids, cameras, and computers. And here's a need with the distribution, and it's a tech play, it's a software play. So I think that the challenge really, at least for me, was finding out what I can do, as opposed to I'm determined to do it and I'm headstrong, I'm going to do it, or you know what, it's not working, or it's not going to win. Let me pivot to something else because I see the industry. If you're in the industry, whatever it is, you see problems. I would never have known this was a problem in the travel industry had I not been there, right? So I'd be, going along headstrong, I'm going to do virtual tours and that's the way it's going to be. And then I realized, oh, here's another problem. And wow, that's a bigger issue. Not that it's a big issue, it's a need to have. So let me pivot. And that's not focus on production. Let's focus on distribution because more opportunity. Yeah. And I think it becomes a matter of, there's no rule for me. It just becomes a matter of, common sense. And in many places, common sense is not that common. But in that case, sit back and look at the numbers and look at the reality and look at the marketing and look at what's it going to take, right?
I like that question. What's it going to take? I as an investor, I always think not what will I make or what will I do, or I don't think of that. I'm like, what is it going to take for this to be successful? Is it going to take a extremely healthy market? Does it take a genius to do something, a backflip through a window for it to be what does it take? I always ask that question. What going to your investor side, you said you invested a little, you went this, and now you gave maybe an indication of things that you like boring business investments, which I love, ETA. What questions do you like to ask before you invest?
I think the most basic is what problem are you solving, right? I mean, if somebody says, look, I want to set up a boutique in downtown, is that a problem? Right? I mean, let's be clear. If it's a problem that you can solve and you can differentiate, that's awesome. And then I like to say the team, but I don't know enough, about the team. For me, it's like, that's a cool solution to a problem that I see. Usually people that come from bigger companies and they say, look, I've worked at, this huge company and I'm an expert. Have you started a company? Have you done that pain and wore multiple hats and know what it's like to do all that? And if they haven't, they expect assistance and processes all ready to be in place. That doesn't exist, right?
Yeah.
So I like to know that they've done something, even if they failed in a startup world before, right? And that they're solving a problem that I think is a problem.
I love those. And I agree 100%. Can we do some rapid fire ones?
Sure.
What was the best purchase under $1,000 that materially changed your life?
Under $1,000. That's a good question. I wish I had a quick answer, but I mean, the best purchase would have been a virtual reality 360 camera, but that was more than $1,000.
What was a book that changed how you think about business or life?
That's an easy one. Gino Wickman wrote a book called Traction, and I had no idea how to run a real business. And somebody gave me the book, and I was like, whoa, Traction. I even named the backdoor password to my technology, Gino Wickman. I told him that because it was like, it's simplified, like when people say, hey, you're going to hire the best people. I go, I can't even afford to pay myself. What do you mean hire the best people? That's not what it means, right? Get a culture. What does that mean, right? It clarifies a lot of that. So Traction rules.
I'll go get it today.
Yeah.
What's a belief that has changed that you were very, very, you held that belief, but has changed in the last 5 years?
A belief that has changed in the last 5 years. I think that I need to be more patient. I don't know if it's a belief or more a personality thing, but I've always been impatient. I want things to happen quicker. I want people, I think, well, how do you not get this? What are you, an idiot? And I think that, I don't know that it's changed. I've just sort of come to the realization that, you got to accept what things are more than expect.
Last one. Maybe this one's not so much rapid fire, but something I'm very curious about successful people is, what is something you do in private, in silence perhaps, that not a lot of people know, but makes you successful?
Well, as I said earlier, it's the discipline of athletics or swimming, working out, because I would take the middle of the day off, I'd break it up, I'd swim, I'd clear my mind. There was nothing to look at, nothing to hear, nothing to see except a black line under the pool. And I would come back, I would feel much better about the day. I've got oxygen in my brain. So I think, not that they don't know that, everybody knows I'm disciplined about swimming, but the other thing I've started to incorporate now is just a meditative practice and Qigong in the morning.
Love it. Henry, it's been an amazing, amazing conversation. You are inspirational. I love how down to earth you are, but at the same time, I know how successful you are. So I'm very honored that you came, that you shared your experience with me.
Thank you, Ahmad. I appreciate it. I hope some jewels manage to make it across and people, understand.
Well, the value is with me already, so I know that others will see it too.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.